Good afternoon everyone, my name is Tony Hanson. I'm the Programme Delivery Manager for South Tyneside Council. You'll probably see you change your job title. Those in local authority will know that that's about my fourth one since I finished this scheme, so continually ever changing. Just going to talk about Trow Quarry in terms of what we did within South Tyneside and the issues we had. I'm going to focus from a local authority perspective. I think it's very interesting to see how we had to look at things in terms of what it was. A scheme that initially, as said, started many years ago. In terms of the scheme itself, was done in 2008. How things came to light, what some of the problems that we encountered, some of the site constraints that were there, the options we looked at and the costs associated with those, the solution we went for, and obviously the phasing of works, and of course lessons learned, which they always are. Some of the site sort of location characteristics, for those who don't know, we have South Shields, which is where we are, north-east coast, just south of the River Tyne here. We've got our main tourist area, which is Sandhaven Beach, which goes there, and then half a mile you've got Trow Quarry here. You've got Trow Rock, this one, you've got what's called Target Point here, Frenchman's Point there. In between you've got Graham Sands and Southern Bay, so that's the area it was. It's a former magnesium limestone quarry. The quarry activity ceased in the 1950s. The rock that was taken from there forms what we have of the north and south pier, and they're still in existence today. The site was then infilled with waste from the 50s through the 70s, and it was then turned into public open space by capping the site and placing, as said, for that. It's also best known for that Great North Run finish, so as you can imagine it's very much a sensitive area in terms of what we have up there. In terms of how things came to light, in 2002 there was a strategy study undertaken along that area of our coastline, which identified that there was coastal erosion, which was resulting in some of the outwash of the material of the soil and the ash. Land was owned by National Trust, managed by them too. Council and National Trust got together and we started to look at what we could do. However, unfortunately, before we had a chance to get out into the public, somebody decided to leak it to the local press. As you can imagine, escalated the issues on site, caused us a lot of problems. We got a large political, public and internal interest at the time. The Foreign Secretary was our MP, which didn't help. We also had interdepartmental fighting because, as environmental health, we said it was an engineering issue. Our engineers said it was a contaminated land issue, and needless to say, we lost, which is why I'm here today. We also had council investigation, proactive management. As you said, we tried to manage it very well, but unfortunately we didn't. As I said, when I first was asked to talk about this, I started coming out in a cold sweat because these are some of the things that happened. Quarry's still unsafe. Probe into exposed toxic dump, over toxic on beach, nice picture of the man there, and the worst one, time bomb. So as you can imagine, that's the kind of thing why, and as you said, for those who have chief executives and leaders, I was literally providing briefing notes, I think every other day around the scheme. Problem itself, we've got no coastal defence in these two areas here, so what you had was the wave erosion coming in, no defence, outwashing material. What we had was initially the soil and ash went onto the foreshore. Unfortunately, that allowed then larger scale items to go onto the foreshore, which became visible to the public. We did have a programme of inspection and clearance, which we obviously were trying to manage whilst we were looking at the long-term and sustainable solution that was needed. So what we did is we did more ground investigation studies around 2003 to 5, which obviously helped to shape the work we needed to do. So these were the problems. What you'll see is there, that's very much a vertical drop in terms of what we had. So you could see the wave erosion coming at its highest point. Show you see if it was undermining the thing, which was resulting in the outwash of materials. Some of the waste that was encountered on the site, it was supposed to be an infill site of domestic and commercial waste. So what you had was brickwork, masonry, crockery, cutlery, glass, soil and ash, which very much was fine. Unfortunately, the ground investigation studies, which were undertaken from 2003 to 5, found all of these. Asbestos, chemical compounds, heavy metals, diesel, petroleum, organics, and of course some hospital syringes in there too. So you can imagine it wasn't a very pleasant site behind that eroding coastal defence. As you can see, the scale of the problem, that diagram shows the infill material and the depth of what we had. So this is the back wall of what was the old quarry, very much deepest towards the back, but as you can see the full extent it goes through in terms of Trow Point to Target Point to Frenchman's, and obviously the two bays in between. So a huge problem in terms of what we had. So the main area is the quarry to the back of the wall, eroding at the front, and and it said that caused the problems that we had. In terms of that, Nick's just touched on the source pathway receptor model. It's clear that we had the source, we had the infill of the horrible materials that were stuck there, we had the receptor in that it was starting to outwash onto that, which was posing a health to the public, as well as the environment and obviously the water that was there in terms of the sea coming in, and we've got the link between the two, which was happening in the pathway that was there. So as you said, it was clear that we hit all three areas in terms of the problems we had. Some of the site constraints, just to add some more problems to the area, it's within the Northumberland Special Protection Area in terms of environmental designation. We also have the Durham Special Area of Conservation, the Durham SSSI, and a Ramsar site. So again, more problems for us to consider when undertaking the scheme as to what we did. Need to minimise foreshore encroachment, that was very much clear from that. In terms of the partner steering group, or project steering group we had Natural England, the Environment Agency, we had National Trust, we had the Council, and we had obviously Royalists going in on that thing. So we had to consider all of those things when we decided which one we were going to go with. In terms of the requirement to remove, there was very much a suggestion of what do we do with the contaminated land, the waste itself, and there was a suggestion that it would be best to leave on site rather than take off. I think that was the general view, that it was the most appropriate thing to do. Overwintering birds, that restricted the time and what we could and when we could do the scheme, because where there was a protected species of overwintering birds that decided to use that site between the months of October to March, so again causing us more problems to consider. And finally, we had some work in our constraints. Obviously houses were just on the other side, about 400 metres away. We had to consider noise and vibration. That meant that the planning conditions were imposed around the working hours on the site. But additionally, the planners also decided to impose traffic restrictions on how the rock that we decided to use would be transferred, which meant everything had to come via the sea and not via the road. So again, additional problems for us to consider. So, what were the options? First one, do nothing, obviously not an option. Option two, full-scale excavation of all the area, 400,000 cubic metres of waste, then refilled with clean material. As you can imagine, it wasn't very cheap, 50 million. So that was no. In terms of the economic benefits that we had, we'd identified that a 50-year protection scheme would create somewhere in the region of 16 million in benefits. So that wouldn't work. Option B, taking away the full frontage and obviously putting a coastal defence at the back of the area, so slightly removing it all. Again, 160,000 cubic metres of waste to take away. That one came in at 20 million, so slightly above what we would needed, so still too high. Option C looked at the protection of Southern Bay only, so the protection of Graham Sands to the north, and leave Southern Bay as it was and remove the waste from there. 115,000 cubic metres, starting to get a little bit better, but still not quite enough. And then obviously option D, rock revetment along the foreshore, slope stabilisation work. So in terms of the works we looked at, that was the thing. As you probably guessed by now, 2 million, and it's the one we went with. What you've got is, well, what we felt was the rock revetment, the slope stabilisation works would enable us to protect that area and obviously the waste behind by taking away a significant amount of the waste at the front, which obviously was the risk that was being posed, and doing those works are there. So in terms of that, we felt it solved the immediate risk to public health. It was a environmentally driven scheme as well. Natural England and the Environment Agency were very much supportive of what we were doing, because some of the works, the slope stabilisation, would create the species or new species of grass to grow in that area, which would hopefully attract insect, birds, etc. to the area. Proportionate approach to the risk identified, minimised the foreshore encroachment, and as I said, it's definitely the best cost-benefit ratio of all the options considered. In terms of the construction phasing of the works, vertical cliff face, our vertical coast faces was what we had. Obviously what we tried to do is take that away, removal of some of the material that was posing the problems, and take that material off site, and obviously that would then provide a much easier in terms of coastal defence to manage. Placement of the geotextile membrane, again, which would help in terms of preventing the erosion in the material to come out in future years. Again, this is hopefully to protect us for 50 years in terms of what we're doing. The construction phase, in terms of the rock itself, 15,000 tonnes of lavic rock that came from granite rock from Lavik in Norway. So that had to be transported from Norway to Sunderland, where it was held. As you can imagine, there was issues around the sort of sea in the terms of when they could come, and they had to look at the tides, which posed lots of problems around the delivery. So that brought 15,000 of rock across. That was then transferred to a smaller rock, a smaller vessel, which then was able to get to the shore on the high tides. It was then transferred from the shore, or from the ship onto the shore, stored in storage before it was then appropriately placed. But obviously we had a tug vessel as well, so as you can imagine it was quite a difficult time, and obviously you had to work around the environmental constraints and the weather in terms of what was happening, so additional problems for us to consider. Placement of the rock revetment, what you can see there is the back of the geotextile membrane. You had smaller rock, it was then graded to the medium-sized rock at the front, and then we have the big boulders at the front. Additional thing to consider again is when your contractors actually order the rock, make sure they order the right size, because ours decided to order 2 lots of big and 1 small and no medium, and it nearly caused us to delay the completion of the scheme, which didn't go down very well, and Nick will remember that all very well. Placement of topsoil and seed in the slopes. Again, what we did here was we felt that rather than just replace it with normal topsoil and then seed it completely across, what we did is we partially seeded the slopes to try and allow new flora and fauna to grow in the area, and obviously create additional enhancement in terms of the environment for that area, which we felt worked very well. So lessons learned. Early proactive communication is absolutely key to it. Even if you don't have the answers, it's better to go out. We learned a huge lesson from that. About 2 years after that scheme finished, we unfortunately found a contaminated land site in the middle of a play area. As you can imagine, it wasn't very well, and we thought, what do we do? Do we keep it quiet? Do we go out? We decided to go public on it, and we didn't get one negative story in the paper or anywhere. It wasn't picked up by anybody. So my advice would be, go proactive, make sure you've got a good comms team who are able to manage it on your behalf and put the article out in the right way, and we didn't have a problem with the second one. Blue boiler suits are definitely better than white. It may sound a silly thing to say, but I can assure you the white with the big vest masks on did not go down very well. We learnt that blue ones would have been much better because they're not as obvious and don't cause the problems. Site constraints. Birds have needs too, apparently. So that Natural England kept telling me. 2 issues the birds posed to us. One, we couldn't start the works until the end of May, June, because you had nesting birds in the grassed areas. So we had to wait till they'd nested and the birds are up and they were away. We couldn't also then, we had to be finished by October in order the overwintering birds. So we literally had a 3 to 4 month window of July through to September, to October, sorry, by which we had to do the works. And it just said it didn't help and we nearly didn't get all the rock. And those who looked at the new funding calculator and tried to put in things, it wouldn't get the same level of funding that we got. It was a £1.84 million scheme. It was delivered on budget, but we've tried putting those costs and calculations into the calculator now, and we wouldn't get that level. So it's just something to be aware of for those local authorities that have little resources now. Pre-scheme, as you can see, cliff face area. There's a public footpath, obviously runs right behind there. That was it when it was finished. The footpath was moved back, retreated, slope stabilisation. There's the new rock, and you can see it there. Very much beds in, and if you look, this is the scheme as of last week. So you can see how it's developed. It's gradually sank in. You can't tell the difference now between it being, you would think it was just natural rock that was there as part of the thing, so it worked very well. The grasses have grown very well around here, and it's a very well used asset in terms of what we have now. And that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much.